And because I have those eyes to see, I'm gonna read the Quran and dismantle it. Many Muslims during that time reached out to me via YouTube. Many followers of mine are Muslim and said, hey, give it a shot. I said, no worries. I'm gonna check it out and I'm gonna find the devil in your book. Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. If you're new, my name is Bobby. Guys, this video is long overdue. I read the Quran, the whole Quran, as a Christian. Yeah, I never believed myself that I will ever make such a video, but yes, I did read the whole Quran. Today I'm going to tell you about it, but before I start talking about it, I want to tell you a little bit more about myself in case this is the first time for you seeing me. I am a Christian Orthodox in fact. My parents are from the Balkans, from northern Macedonia, and I have been baptized as a Christian Orthodox from birth. Back then, Yugoslavia was still under communist rule, and therefore it was illegal for me to get baptized, so we had a priest coming over to our flat that baptized me undercover, so to speak. So therefore all of my family members are identified as Christian Orthodox. However, most of them are not practicing like most people nowadays all around the world. People became very secularized and therefore they're not truly practicing Christians in that sense. However, as being Slavs from the Balkan, they of course identify as Christians. The Slavs on the Balkan are predominantly Christian Orthodox. That is due to the reformation of Kirill and Methody under the Bulgarian Empire at the time. The Slavs used to be pagans, and Kirill and Methody came and reformed the Slavs, so to speak, and brought Christian Orthodoxy from Byzantium over to the Bulgarian Empire. And the rest is history. Since then, the people on the Balkan are very identified culturally with their religions. Most people on the Balkan don't know much about their religions. However, they went to church or went to the mosque and know that they are Christians or Muslims. Of course, this fuels a lot of conflict. For example, me as a Macedonian, I grew up hating the Albanians because the Albanians were our enemy. The Albanians were Muslims and they were our enemy. Of course, there is this big history on the Balkan that we were under the Caliphate, under Ottoman rule for over 500 years. That fuels even more anger against Islam, against Muslims. So I grew up like that. That being said, my parents, yes, they are from Macedonia, and every year we would visit. However, I grew up in Germany, in Nordrhein-Westfalen. In Nordrhein-Westfalen, we have a huge Turkish population. So I had a lot of Muslim friends, but at the same time I observed that most of those Muslim friends got into some sort of criminal activity at the time. Many of them were smoking weed, many of them were selling drugs, many of them were into prostitution, robberies, gang violence and whatnot. So my experience with Muslims was pretty negative after all, I have to say. Therefore I had no interest whatsoever to look into Islam. I was identified as a Christian and that's that. In my 20s I kind of let go of my faith and I dabbled in the new age. I started using psychedelic drugs such as mushrooms, LSD, ayahuasca. I explored dietary venues such as veganism, which led me to Buddhism, Hinduism and other pagan religions as well. I got interested in the occult, the Mayan calendar and whatnot. I let go of Christianity for roughly a decade, I would say, and was identified as nothing, as pure consciousness, if you will. I was just Bobby, just doing my thing. I didn't want to label myself. I just wanted to live life. So I started traveling the world. 2014, I left Germany and I went to Australia, then Indonesia, then Thailand, then back to Australia and New Zealand, over to South America, Machu Picchu in Peru and whatnot. I visited many places, many different cultures, saw different religions and was convinced that religion is just that. Cultural norms that people adhere to, and I don't want to be part of that. I saw myself as above that in a sense. I saw myself as the enlightened one that doesn't need any of that. Until I returned back to Europe, to Bulgaria, and I felt that yearning for God. And I felt empty, I felt broken. All of those things that I tried led me nowhere. I felt as if I had failed, I felt abandoned, I felt left alone, so therefore I sought God. Naturally, I returned to Christian orthodoxy, and at that time it felt like a homecoming. It felt like something that I used to know, but at the same time have never truly explored. As I said, I was identified as a Christian Orthodox, but I never really studied the religion. So now I return to it, and now I really want to know what's up. I really wanted to understand my own religion. So I started digging deep, and I found out about the Trinity. I already made a video about this. Guys, for 2 years I was battling with this thought, and I was trying to understand the Trinity, and I was trying to make myself believe the Trinity, but after all of those intentions have failed miserably, because I couldn't convince myself of a three-headed God. Didn't work. No matter how I looked at it, it just didn't add up, didn't make sense for me, and therefore I was quite surprised, honestly quite shocked, that my religion entailed that. This was a wake-up call for me, because I was seeking God in its unity, in its oneness, if you will, and not God as some sort of deity that I cannot comprehend. I always remind myself of the saying, your God is not a God of confusion. So it was very confusing to me, after all. Hence, for the very first time in my life, I considered, you know what, I'm gonna read the enemy's book, the Quran. Why not? Because I started watching David Wood videos. And David Wood was so confident in his message that Muhammad was this degenerate guy and Islam was this evil religion coming from Satan himself. The biggest deception known to mankind. The real Antichrist is Islam. So I got convinced even more about my own faith. I became arrogant, pompous. I said, God brought me back to orthodoxy, the real religion. He brought me back to the truth. And now I can truly see that Islam is from the devil. And because I have those eyes to see, I'm gonna read the Quran and dismantle it. Many Muslims during that time reached out to me via YouTube. Many followers of mine are Muslim and said, hey, give it a shot. I said, no worries. I'm gonna check it out and I'm gonna find the devil in your book. So I opened the Quran and I started reading. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the merciful. That was surprising to me. It really was. I know to most Muslims this is simply common sense. They're wondering what I'm talking about. But for me as a Christian, I didn't remember a page in the Bible that addresses God like that first. I kept on reading and I noticed that every surah, every chapter starts like that. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the merciful. And I was impressed. I thought, yeah, that makes sense. You should address God first. You should give praise to the Lord first before you start talking about Him. That makes sense. I couldn't find anything like that in the Bible. Now, I don't want to discredit the Bible, because the Bible is very different than the Quran. The Bible is more like a library and not so much like one book. The Quran, on the other hand, is exactly that. The Quran is one concise book, one manual, if you will, much shorter than the Bible. The Bible is a diverse variety of different books, of different advices, and doesn't even claim to be the Word of God at all times, but much more a compilation of divinely inspired books put together by the Church Fathers. And that is fine. The Bible itself is an epic tale with an abundance of knowledge. It's absolutely beautiful to read. However, the Quran is much more concise, much more simplistic, if you will, even repetitive, I have to say. But nevertheless, the message is crystal clear. By reading the Quran itself, it doesn't posture up or pose as something else. It simply says what it is. It comes as a guidance. It comes as a clarification for those that want to see. Again, very, very powerful, I have to say. So I continued reading. So devote yourself to the religion of monotheism. The natural instinct Allah, God, has instilled in mankind. Yet again, simple but powerful. It rings true to me. It makes sense that we have a natural disposition in which we seek God. I think anybody can relate to that. When you were a child, most of us, we knew that there was a God. The oneness of God was crystal clear to us. We didn't think about other deities. We didn't think about a three-headed God system. With this, I already agree. I want to make that very, very clear here. I do not believe in the Trinity yet again, even as a Christian. That doesn't add up to me. That doesn't make sense. Therefore, when this natural predisposition is described within the Quran, it resonates with me and it makes sense. Even in Hinduism, you have the Brahmin. The Brahmin is the Godhead, and out of that Godhead, all the other deities come forth. In Christianity, we would call it angels and demons. The Muslims would call them jinns. However, the Hindus went down the path, similar to the pagans, of worshipping those deities and making gods out of them. But naturally, that doesn't make sense. The origin of all things is, of course, a oneness, is a singularity of sorts, so to speak, where everything collapses, where everything originates. Yet again, the Alpha and the Omega. This is crystal clear to us. I always thought that it's crystal clear to all Christians. I really didn't believe that Christians think about God in a Trinity, in a fashion of a Trinity. I don't think that anybody truly does anyways, to be honest. When you're praying to God, how do you imagine God? How do you think of God? How do you remember God? How do you even believe in a God that is three-headed, in a God that consists of three deities? That doesn't add up to me. Anyways, I continued reading. Whoever strives only for himself. Allah, God, is independent of the beings. And again, I had to admit, powerful man, powerful. God is beyond all beings. He is not the creation. For me, naturally, instinctively, that is crystal clear. But moreover, as I said, I had psychedelic experiences. I went to the Amazon jungle and I drank the ayahuasca with the shamans, with the indigenous people in South America, and I experienced the oneness of God over there as well. God himself is beyond all comprehension. God himself is beyond all beings. He is indeed the only reality. This is the way that I saw God, that I experienced God to this very day. Nothing else is real but God. And that already excludes a Trinity, and of course it excludes any type of being. Even the messengers of God, even though they are exalted figures, are nothing but that. Exalted figures, creations of the Almighty. That is crystal clear to me. And when I saw it in the Quran, I was shocked. Yes, I was shocked. Because Islam for me was a violent religion, a religion of the enemy, a religion of the devil, not a religion of the oneness of God. The oneness of God that everybody comprehends. Even my father, who is a Christian Orthodox, he doesn't go to church. He never read the Bible. When I ask him about God, he tells me that God is one, that God is the most powerful. He understands that too intuitively. And I am of the firm conviction, sue me, but that you don't have to be an intellectual in order to understand God. Intellectualism, study, doctor titles, all of that is fine here on earth in this creation, and you can impress other people with it. but instinctive understanding is embedded in you, and even a beggar can understand God within. That's how I see it. And therefore the Quran confirmed that. For me it was quite shocking, however, to realize after reading the Quran that most Muslims that I've met in my life, not all, but most Muslims that I met in my life, actually didn't follow the Quran at all. Actually weren't even considered real Muslims. The Quran talked about humility. The Quran talked against being boastful. The Quran talked about no compulsion in religion. The Quran talked about that God guides who He wills and that you shouldn't argue about faith. The Quran even talked about that everything will be clarified once we are returned to God. Moreover, the Quran said that if God willed it, we all would have had the same religion. But God wills it otherwise. Most of us have different religions and we argue and we debate and we discuss about it, but in the end we will stand in front of our Lord and He will clarify it for us. You don't take your religion to the other side, man. The religion is here for us to guide us, to make us better people. Once we face God, all of that evaporates, all of those human conceptualization ends, and we face the ultimate truth, the only truth, which is God, of course. Another powerful message yet again is, it is Allah's pattern, ongoing since the past. You will never find any change in Allah's pattern. That sentence really struck home because it showed the beautiful simplicity of the message. God's way is always the same. There is no change in the way, in the pattern of God. It is always the same, always accessible the same way. And that, of course, made me think a lot about my own faith and about Christianity. Thinking about the sacrifice of Jesus for us, Him being crucified so our sins can be forgiven, made me truly think about the people before Him and people that didn't hear the message, etc., etc. Out of a sudden, I realized that there must be a red line, a clear underlying reality that is always the same. Meaning that if you're alone in the jungle and you never heard about any type of religion, there must be this natural religion that is instilled within you, this understanding of the worship of one supreme being. That made all the sense in the world yet again. So now I've been rambling for quite some time and I still didn't clarify if I found the devil within the Quran. Guys, needless to say, I obviously didn't find the devil within the Quran, but I found many warnings about the devil. The Quran warns multiple times about the devil. It clarifies how sneaky the devil is, it warns you of the devil, and it glorifies God over and over and over again. Honestly, I tried to find the devil in the detail, but I failed. I couldn't find the devil within that scripture, no matter how hard I looked. Now, looking back, I really wonder where David Wood is getting his information from. It's quite interesting, because I was following David Wood for roughly 1.5 years, and he was so adamant in his work, warning all the people of bad Islam. But after reading the Quran, I couldn't find the devil in it. I couldn't find the evil in it that was proclaimed by all the Christian apologists. I couldn't find the maliciousness, the perversion within the Quran. I found a concise, clear message within it. So now, after giving the Quran so much praise, you're probably wondering why I'm not converting to Islam already. Already become a Muslim, Bobby. I saw it in the comment section before, because I do have respect for the religion. Guys, as I said, culturally, I'm a Christian Orthodox. I'm from the Balkan, I'm a Slav, and this is the religion that I was brought up with. In my heart, I know God is one. In my heart, I know that creation is creation, and the Creator is the Creator. Nothing can change that. The Quran confirmed that. It didn't change my mind. However, as I said, over the years I have been exploring many different ideologies. And by now it is already 1 year in of me studying Islam. I have not only read the Quran, but I started reading hadiths, and I have looked into the different conceptualizations of God, into what Tawheed means, the Fitrah, and so much more. This time around, I'm taking my time. This is not an emotional decision. I have to learn much more about the religion and about the customs and the practices of Islam before I truly decide to change my whole religion. Because at the moment, I am in a very happy place. Intuitively, my natural religion is intact. Culturally, yes, yet again, I'm a Christian Orthodox. Intuitively, I'm following God's will. I'm following God's path with no ifs and buts, with nothing surrounding Him, the only truth. Nothing changed about that. As I said, the Quran was a beautiful confirmation of exactly that. I will see where God guides me to. Until then, I welcome every single one of you in the comment section. Let me know about your faith. Let me know about your understanding of God. Let me know if you're Christian, if you're Muslim, if you're Jewish, if you're Hindu, or if you're Buddhist even. Let me know what your perspective is, and we can discuss it in the comment section. Alright guys, this is it for today's video. If you liked it, leave it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed already, guys, please do so. And if you want to support this channel, all the links are in the description box below. Thank you so much for your ongoing support, guys. Alright, this is it for today. A long one. As always, may God bless you all. Much love and peace.
Japan is a name that rings a bell in everything from electronics, cars, airplanes, drones, and ships. This is a country that featured prominently in the Second World War as part of the axis of power with Germany and Italy. The country that has often made history, becoming the first nation in the world in the history of mankind to be nuked by the United States. Japan holds a very special place in Asia and the world economy. The people of Japan themselves are very industrious and enterprising. Without oil, they built one of the most advanced economies in the world with a powerful reserve currency to match. Recently, there has been an upward growth of the Muslim population in the country, and these trends are coming against the backdrop of the declining birth rate in Japan and the need for more traditional orientation. Islam, I guess, could help the country solve, some of its very dangerous challenges of racism, decreasing birth rate, and social cohesion. I was thrilled when I took a look at the recent statistics released by the Pew Research Center. It estimated that there were 185,000 Muslims in Japan in 2010. However, 9 years later in 2019, it was estimated that the numbers rose to 230,000, with the Japanese converts accounting for over 50,000 of the estimated numbers. Pretty interesting is that Japan now has more than 110 mosques compared to 24 in 2001.
It's like all Muslims around the world here in Japan, we are so few. This is the opportunity.
金曜日の集団礼拝でしょ。無料で配っています。どこ国にいても来る。
Just hard work. Oh, don't do that. You understand?
لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له له الملك وله الحمد وهو على كل شيء قدير。
土日の今東京ジャーミーツアーって作ったんですよ。モスクを見てもらったり話をする。
Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. Welcome to another episode of the Open-Minded Thinker Show. Please like and share this video to let YouTube show it to others, especially our brothers and sisters in Japan, where even though Islam is growing, it still only accounts for less than 0.1% of Japan's population. Don't forget to join us as well by subscribing to the channel to help us grow better. It's becoming interesting by the day that Japan, an atheist nation, is becoming increasingly religious with the exponential growth of Islam among the young population. In fact, this is the best time to do dawah in the country.
My name is Kyoichiro Sugimoto. Muslim name is Salman. I'm from Japan. I was born in Seki City, in Gifu Prefecture, Japan. And I embraced Islam 25 years ago in Japan. It is said that my family came from like samurai clan originally.
And your town is known for making what?
It's a samurai sword. For the 750 years, they are producing samurai sword.
So Brother Salman, what are you doing in Qatar?
Well, I do dawah, especially for the Japanese non-Muslims. And the Japanese understand Japanese more than any language, right? More than any language, yeah?
How many Japanese people have you spoken to and how are the conversations?
Yeah, alhamdulillah, 218 Japanese non-Muslims, yeah. And established quality communication, conversations in Qatar Masjid, yeah, in Doha.
And how was their response? What kind of things did they say?
Well, our response was basically they are very first time to know Islam. It's really first time, you know, to visit masjid for the first time in their life. So I introduced very basics of Islam, especially Tawheed, especially the existence of God and the oneness of God. And they are really surprised to know that the logic behind how Muslims logically believe things. They agree, they understand these points.
One could say nothing but remain optimistic about the growth of the faith in Japan. But before we hop into the next scene, let me intimate to you about what really is causing the inhibition of the growth in the country. I will be offering 2 reasons. Now let's make it 3. 1 now and then the remaining 2 after another video. I would love you guys to watch. Lack of missionary activities. The Muslim community in Japan has been criticized for not engaging in effective missionary activities to promote religion among the Japanese population. This has resulted in limited outreach to the local population, which can make it difficult for people to learn about Islam and consider converting. Nevertheless, YouTube has changed all that, but you need to share videos like this.
ということで暑いんですけども、メッカに行くための清掃という風にね、なっております。
今ジェッタにいるんですけど、ここから
どれぐらい？時間
1時間ぐらいですかね。
1時間ぐらいかけてメッカの方に向かっていきたいと思います。
ここがメッカのボーダーになります。今から中に行ってマッカの街を見ていきたいと思います。
メッカの中心地ですかね、ここは。
すごいよ、景色が全然違う。ここがそのイスラム教の人しか入れない場所。
ほんまやな。
僕たちもねムスリムなんで、
ムスリムに改宗したので、
はい。なので全然問題ないんですけど、
聖地なので、
はい。これがですね、メッカの有名なモスク
ですね。
はい。これでね行っていきたいと思います。
行きます。
すごいな。ついにやってきました。メッカの聖地最大のモスク。世界中からイスラム教徒が集まって、ここをですね7周するということで、あそこの周りを7周していきたいと思います。行けたけどね。
行けたね。
ここまで人が多すぎたわ。これ7周。
人がやばい。人がもう多い、めちゃくちゃ。で、距離が長い、一周でだっても2、30分かかるよな。それを通して、信仰心高めて、中心へ行く。はい。こちら メッカです。
メッカです。人めっちゃ多いな。
人マジで多い。やっぱすごいな、このみんなの熱狂みたいなの伝わってくる。
これ絶対日本ではさ、味わえない。
そうやな、絶対ないもんな。
みんなが神を信じて、神のために祈りを捧げて、あの瞬間すごかったな。みんなで祈った瞬間とかさ、
みんなで祈ってたらマジで
何万人いるのって感じるの、みんなが一つになった瞬間ですよ。17億人ぐらいでしょ。
17億はエグいな。
でみんなここを目指してるわけだからね。
そうやね。こんなに本気で信じて、それによって救われてる人がこんなにもいてっていう。
いや本当にね、
それを感じれるのはめちゃくちゃ貴重な経験やなっていう。
なんかさ、中東の人がなんでこんなおもてなしがすごいのかって、いやここなんだろうな、もう神のためにっていうのがあるから、やっぱおもてなしをすることで天国に行けると。
こういう人間性を作るっていう点ではほんまにすごい。
すごい、本当すごい。はい、じゃああと3週頑張っていきましょう。
頑張っていきましょう。
出芸室やばい。これすごいわ。
緑のゾーンは走らないといけないです。おりゃー、走り切りました。走り切った後の感想はいかがでしょうか。
疲れましたね。
さあついに7往復目ですけども、
もう幸せです。
あ、幸せなのよかった。フィニッシュ。
はい、ということで
行ってきましたけども、
めちゃくちゃ大変でしたね。
長旅やったな。
そうだって3、4時間ぐらい歩き
3、4時間ぐらい歩きっぱなしやった。なんかこんな歩くと思ってなかったな。
お祈りもめっちゃしたしな。もともとね、
Just as the guys have mentioned, negative stereotype about Islam are an inhibiting factor, and this leads to the remaining two reasons I promised to let you know. There are predictably dominance of traditional religion. Japan has a long history of traditional religions, especially Shintoism and Buddhism, which are deeply rooted in the country's culture and society. This can make it challenging for Muslims to gain a foothold and compete for attention and influence among the population. Negative stereotype and perception. Negative stereotypes and perception of Islam and Muslims in general in the country Japan, which can create a barrier for people who might otherwise be interested in the religion. This can include fear of terrorism or a lack of understanding of Islamic beliefs and practices. So this opens up an opportunity for us to get your line and propagate Islam through social media in Japan, and inshallah we'll be able to see more of this person in the next video.
Quran は、全部アラビア語で書かれています。アラビア語も勉強してて、読むのが右から左なんですよね。日本語と逆で。
逆っすね。
で、文字と文字がくっつくと形が変わったりとか、僕も今本当に勉強している、本当に最初のステップですけれども。
一連の見せてもらった後で、カイジさんのバックグラウンドとかについていろいろ聞きたいんですけど、まず、多分見てる人みんな思うと思うんですけど、どうしてムスリムになられたのかっていう。
なるほど。
はい。
結構これは、聞かれる質問なんですけれども、私自身、出身も、生まれも育ちも、日本のですけれども、大学に入るまで海外に行ったこともなかったんですよね。
そうなんですね。
全く。なんでもちろんイスラムの命も知らないような人でした。でただ、2015年、私が大学3年生の頃に、ブルネイっていう国に留学する、機会があったんですね。ブルネイっていう国は 70% ぐらいがムスリムの国でした。ちょうど2015年っていうと、その中東の方でね、日本人のジャーナリストが殺されてしまったりとか、時代だった。
ありましたね。
なので、 やっぱりちょっとネガティブなイメージっていうのはやっぱり少なからず持ってたわけですよね。日本で見る情報って、それしかないですよね。
そうですね。やっぱり日本人からすると、イスラム教がメディアに出るときってネガティブなことじゃないですか。例えばイスラムが例えば過激派がとかイスラム国とかそういうネガティブなニュースでしかイスラム教を見たことがない。
全部ネガティブなニュースに関連に
つながっちゃいます。
ただ私がブルネイに行った時に、そのイメージっていうのが180度変わって、今までメディアでしか見なかったイスラム教、ムスリムの姿っていうのを、しっかり留学っていう形で一緒に生活したり、時間を過ごすわけですよね。そうすると彼らの信仰しているものであったりとか、考え方とか行動っていうのが、やっぱり少しずつ理解できるようになって、それを勉強していくうちに、惹かれていったというか、素晴らしい生き方だなというところで、実際に私も2017年にイスラム教に改宗しようと思って、改宗をしたというのが経緯になります。
なるほど。
Let's leave it there, people. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum.
Who is this? What's this? How's this? But this is a big insult. And so I think oh my God, what did I do? I'm a new Muslim. I'm sorry. And everyone around me said, he's a new Muslim, please don't. They said, no, you can't do this. My name is John Nelson. I'm 69 years old. I was born in San Diego, California. I was the first person in the family to go to university. It was the 60s. And so what did I become? A philosophy major, which drove him crazy because he thought, what's the point? You're not going to do anything with that. Anyway, when I was a young man, I was raised as a Catholic. And when I finished the 8th grade, I thought that I would become a priest. So I entered a seminary, a prep seminary. I became Muslim in December 2010. Two experiences which happened to me were wake-up calls in the middle of the night. I was sleeping. I live alone. And in the middle of the night, I heard a voice, a very loud voice. And it was in English. And it said, pray. And I thought, this has not happened to me before. So I thought, okay. And then in my mind, I just said, I don't know how to pray. And the voice again said, in English, pray. And then two thoughts crossed my mind. One of them was, I believe, and the other one was, I submit. Just thoughts. So I closed my eyes and I went back to sleep. 4 weeks or 5 weeks later, same thing. Middle of the night, I hear a voice, and the voice this time says, read. And there happened to be a copy of the Quran on my bed table. One that someone from work had given me after I first came to the UAE. And I used to read it and look through it at night, and kind of transition between being my work day and then going to sleep. That's all I used it for. And then after a while I stopped reading, and so I just set it there. But it was there, and so I turned the light on, and I got the book, and I began to read. And then the thought occurred to me. It occurred to me, this is not a book for you to read and relax, and this is not a transition for you between your day job and going to sleep at night. There is something in this book, and you need to read this. And that's what the whole purpose, that's why this book is here. This is the beginning of our adult relationship with God, with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is where we recognize who we are and who He is and what our relationship is with Him. For me, the real benefit of Islam, its direction and its connection. Because I know that if I follow the principle and the spirit of this religion, this Islam, this submission, that I'm not going to go wrong. My biggest concern was and is my family. At the time, I was completely wrapped up in this experience. But when I went back home, and met my wife. I did not discuss this with her. I was going back home in 3 weeks, so I went and I told her that I'd become Muslim. And if you're married, you can imagine what she said. She said, "You didn't talk to me about this? You didn't talk about this?" I said, "It's not something that I can ask your permission for. Just as when your relationship with God, I cannot say don't do that." What Islam has taught me that everything has its time. It's not a time of your choosing, it's not a time of my choosing. The opening is from God. So if our heart is open and our mind is open, then it can come to us. If it's closed, then it's not going to come. My recommendation, however old you are, is listen to that part of you, listen to that voice, and follow that voice, and trust in that voice. Because the person who's giving that voice the words that calling you is the God that created you. You have to find inside that connection. You make that connection with yourself and with the God that created you, and then you will be connected with everything around you, including your family.
Save 10% with my code BOBBY10 on raw, organic, grass-fed and grass-finished, freeze-dried organ meats from Grassland Nutrition. Link in the description box. Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. If you're new, my name is Bobby. Guys, we're gonna revisit the CJ Werleman show today with his just uploaded video, Unstoppable Rise of Islam in Unexpected Places. So I really enjoyed his coverage on the Football World Cup and how Islam was the actual winner. Therefore, I'm really curious to see what CJ Werleman means with the unstoppable rise of Islam in unexpected places. With no further ado, let's have a look.
Hello everyone, I'm CJ Werleman. Don't forget to click the subscribe button below, and we kindly ask you please help keep our show going and growing by supporting my journalism at patreon.com/CJ Werleman. Now let's get into it. Islam is not only the world's fastest growing religion, having grown from 1.6 billion followers in 2013 to 2 billion today, but it will also be the world's largest religion by 2050, the year the total Muslim population will exceed 3 billion people. And there's absolutely nothing.
It's very interesting. I'm trying to imagine the world and how the narrative will shift once Islam becomes the dominant religion worldwide, because then you cannot say that Islam is a minority. In fact, if it is the world's leading religion, I believe that this could shatter the Western dominance.
These guys can do about it. Not him, nor him, and certainly not her. Because Islam is proving to be an unstoppable force. And not because it's being spread forcibly, but because the Prophet Muhammad made it easy to understand.
He is absolutely correct, man. The simplicity of the message is what is appreciated by the people. It is not a complex, complicated doctrine. Of course, you can go into the complexity of the religion, and if you want to become a scholar, you would be amazed. However, the core message is simple. I personally believe as well that the truth is always simple. There is no Son of God that has been sent down for us to die for our sins. There are no countless of manifestations of different goddesses and gods coming from Brahmin. You do not have to be initiated through psychotropic plants in the Amazon jungle. No, quite the opposite. The message is very clear. Worship God alone.
Unstoppable force. And not because it's being spread forcibly, but because the Prophet Muhammad made it easy to understand.
But what many people tell me is that they find Islam much more simpler than Christianity.
Sure.
For example, they'd say, look, in Christianity, you guys have to believe in a Trinity. You know, there's one God who exists as three persons, but they're not three gods. They're one God, but different persons, and that's kind of complicated. In Islam, we have it simple. There is just one God who exists as one person.
Obviously, Islam will continue to grow at a steady and predictable rate in Muslim-majority countries. But what I find really fascinating is how the religion is growing in countries where Muslims represent a tiny minority of the population. I'm talking about
of course, man, because Muslims actually reproduce, and we Westerners, or even here in Japan, you see that in Japan rates are through the roof. People are so depressed, they believe in nothing, they believe in work. They do not believe in the family structure anymore. And therefore you will see that the Muslim population will outgrow the atheist population, because the atheist population is so smart that they're gonna get rid of themselves ultimately. If you look into the doctrines that have popped up in the past 10 years alone, it's absolutely sickening. You look into the ABC Club and what they do to children. Moreover, you look into simple education and how everybody prides themselves to be an intellectual, and first I have to study and then I'm gonna have kids. And ultimately they end up with maybe one kid at best. I lived in Germany for the longest time, and the far right is complaining about the migrants, and look at them, how many children they produce. It is the great replacement, etc., etc. Yeah, well, produce more children then. Nobody is stopping you. Muslims are producing the most children, and just by that metric alone, they will conquer the world. Simple.
Japan, South Korea, Mexico, and many others.
Of course.
Because what makes these countries captivating case studies is the way in which their respective Muslim populations are growing organically and not by immigration. It's important to tell these stories because we counter Islamophobia by promoting a deeper understanding of Islam. Because yes, while it remains the world's fastest growing religion, it also remains the least understood.
100%.
But we start with South Korea, where the Muslim population has grown to 200,000, which is a remarkable achievement, given Islam was banned in the country until as recently as 1910, when Korea pursued an isolationist policy. It wasn't until the 1950s when Islam was introduced to the Korean people by members of the Turkish military, who came to fight alongside South Korean soldiers during the Korean War.
They asked to help us again in Korea, because to help you, of course. I'm 88, but that's what we like to do.
I mean, how can anybody not love that guy? Well, South Koreans love him too, as they do all Turkish people, which is why the two countries have forged an incredibly close bond over the past 70 years.
Wow.
This relationship has allowed Islam to flourish. Watch this Korean woman explain how she became a Muslim.
근데 제가 막 공부를 하면서 아랍 역사를 공부하다 보니까 자연스럽게 이슬람 역사까지 이렇게 알게 됐거든요. 근데 당시에 좋은 책이 별로 없어서 공부하는데 꽤 애를 먹었었어요. 뭐 인터넷을 뒤져도 한국어로 된 좋은 정보 같은 것도 별로 없었고, 그래서 이슬람 성원에도 이제 제가 많이 방문하고 그러면서 무슬림들하고 교류도 하고 그렇게 이슬람에 대해서 좀 알게 된 계기가 되었죠. 네.
Her story is typical of the Korean Muslim experience. But since converting to Islam in 2007, Bora Song has become somewhat of an Instagram star with more than 180,000 followers, and she uses her social media influence to help Koreans better understand Islam.
That's amazing.
When Koreans aren't learning Islam from Muslims like Bora Song, they are converting to the religion after working or traveling through the Middle East or nearby Muslim majority countries, Indonesia and Malaysia. There are many paths to the top of the mountain.
Indonesia and Malaysia is of course very relatable. Those are Asian countries, and this was so surprising to me. I was ignorant and arrogant at the same time. Very little to no knowledge whatsoever, but I thought I know it all. I thought I know Islam, I know exactly what it's about without ever opening up the Quran or visiting a mosque. So when I traveled to Southeast Asia, to Malaysia, to Indonesia, and then I saw those Asian Muslims, I was mind blown. At that point I didn't even know that those Asian countries are in fact the majority Muslim population to this very day. I thought it's some Arabs or Turks or whatnot. No, Asians are the #1 Muslim population today.
Korean citizens, they are very, how can I say, interested to what they understand about Islam. In case of Seoul Central Masjid, we can say maybe every year, the number of embraced Muslim, new Muslim, I mean, more than 100 persons.
Sadly, many Koreans continue to have big misunderstandings about Islam, mostly because local media began linking the religion to terrorism in 2007.
Always.
The year 23 Korean missionaries were kidnapped by the Taliban, 2 of whom were killed before the South Korean government reached a deal for their release. The saga dominated media headlines for weeks, creating a negative impression about Islam that persists today.
위험하다거나 이런 생각 혹시 드세요?
그것도 어떻게 보면은 편견 같은 거긴 한데 이게 계속 저희가 접하는 그 사람들에 대해서 접하는 거는 미디어밖에 없고 항상 뭔가 이렇게 터지고 되게 사건에 대해서만 접하다 보니까 약간의 시선이 안 좋게 가는 건 있는데 그래도 최대한 색안경을 빼고 보려고는 해요.
Earlier this year, Muslim students faced local backlash after building a mosque on campus grounds.
Here is a representative of the KNU Muslim students community, and the community is comprised of more or less 150 Muslim students. This place is not some new place for us because we have been praying here from past 7 years, and now like after feeling the need for it because the Muslim students are larger in number, so they were not able to pray properly in the previous place, so we started the construction of this place.
You can see why anti-Islamophobia activists, including us, must do more to dispel misunderstandings about Islam in Korea. We now turn to South Korea's neighbour to the west, the island nation of Japan, where Islam has experienced exponential growth during the past 20 years.
I have to say, man. Amazing
in fact, the total Muslim population in the Asian country has doubled in the past decade, from 110,000 in 2010 to 230,000 in 2019, with native Japanese converts accounting for roughly 25% of the Muslim population. This growth is matched by the number of mosques being built across the Japanese archipelago.
According to multiple scatter reports throughout the last 2 decades, back in 1970, there were only 2 mosques in Japan. In 2001, the number increased to 24. In 2017, the number was 90. And currently, there are 115 mosques in the country. A direct evidence of exponentially greater growth of Islam in Japan.
For sure.
What really makes Japan stand out as a host to a minority Muslim population is the near total absence of Islamophobia. Remarkably, Muslims are welcome to practice their faith in accordance with Islamic principles, even in public.
What most Muslims should know about life in Japan and living in Japan as a Muslim is that it's extremely comfortable to live as a Muslim, even more so than many Muslim countries. The reason I say that is because I don't see any restrictions on practicing my religion. Living in Japan as a Muslim, we have mosques, we have halal food, and there is a large Muslim community, actually, we can hang out with, we can talk to, so I think we feel quite comfortable living in Japan.
This is something that reminds me of an Islamic village that I just visited here in Thailand. I'm gonna make a separate video on that, guys, so I don't want to spoil it. However, what is so interesting to me is that Muslims keep their tradition. They keep the dress code, they keep everything, their food, etc., etc. In the midst of the Thailand tourist and party scene, those people established their own Islamic town. And you can see the same thing here in Japan. At first glance, you would never believe that this here is in Japan. This is such a great testament to that Islam never changes.
Living in Japan as a Muslim.
Our final stop on this short tour around the world is Mexico, where the Muslim population has grown from 50,000 in the early 1990s to 120,000 today, which is astonishing in such a devoutly conservative Christian country. Curious?
It is astonishing on the one hand, but on the other hand, Christianity has been brought to Mexico. It has been brought to South America. So before that, they weren't Christians. They were something that the Europeans would classify as pagans. They had their own medicinal healers, etc., etc. So therefore, in our time frame, this seems extremely surprising. But on the other hand, in the long scheme of things, this is a natural development. Even you, CJ, you're from Australia. You know for sure that Australia was very, very different before it got colonized and became a somewhat Christian country. So if we take our distance and look at it objectively, it's not surprising after all.
The village of San Cristobal in the state of Chiapas has been home to a Muslim majority since a Spanish Muslim missionary visited there in 1994.
Lo único que recuerdo fue como este centro que tenemos aquí, estaban sentados en el suelo y estaban cantando algo que yo pues prácticamente no entendía. Y eso fue lo que me llamó la atención. Invité a mi papá, mi mamá, mis tíos, primos, abuelos, gente que conozco de infancia, los llevé y afortunadamente pues todos se hicieron musulmanes y ahí es donde empezó a crecer la comunidad.
Today, Islam has not only become the fastest growing religion in Mexico, but also the fastest growing among Latin American migrants in the United States.
lot of their values tend to be conservative values. They have a high respect for Jesus, who we say is a prophet in Islam. They have a high respect for the mother of Jesus, for Mary. So there's that kind of connection with the religion and the idea of God and also love for God.
Notably, Islam offers Latin Americans a cultural familiarity that stretches back to the Moors in Spain.
Latinos soon reconnect with a hidden past. They say, Islam is not really that foreign to us. Islam is us, is part of us. 4,000 words from Spanish come from Arabic. Camisa, pantalón, tomate, ensalada.
Muslims in Mexico still face discrimination, however, because of the way in which North American media has linked Islam with terrorism.
Of course.
But to overcome these misconceptions, Latino Muslim organizations have launched a number of initiatives aimed to promoting a better understanding of Islam among the majority Christian population, with groups such as Islam in Spanish coordinating mosque tours and the like, all of which is helping to break down barriers and counter Islamophobia. As you can see, Islam continues to grow rapidly and in unexpected places.
Alright guys, and this is it for today's video. CJ knocked it out of the ballpark yet again. Fantastically researched video, absolutely beautifully put together. Extensive material gathered here to show the different cultures that embraced Islam and how the population is growing. After watching this video as a non-Muslim, I'm really not wondering if, but when CJ will finally revert. Alright guys, but this is it for today's video. If you liked it, leave it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed already, guys, please do so. And if you want to support my channel via Patreon, all the links are in the description box below. Thank you so much for your ongoing support, guys. As always, much love and peace.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell. Also like the video.